know the settings in place are what is needed to take us out of the lockdown, but what we can't assume is that everybody will do the right thing 100% of the time, but we need to be able to assume that.
Tonight, breaking news: 1 week into Sydney's snap lockdown, the city and the state is on edge amid fears of a rise in cases, while other cities across the country begin to enjoy new freedoms. We'll get the latest from our reporter on the ground in CBD in just a few minutes. It's Sunday, the 4th of July. You're watching 6 News also tonight.
I do not want under 40s to get AstraZeneca because they are at increased risk of getting they're rare, it is rare, but they're at increased risk of getting that rare clotting syndrome.
Confusion over AstraZeneca's jab continues, with some now hesitant to get vaccinated at all because of it. Doctors reporting a surge in people cancelling their appointments for their second dose, as Queensland's Chief Health Officer is accused of being an anti-vaxxer. And later, a special report. Just days after unveiling a full-phase plan to get Australia back to normal, the PM is now facing criticism amid questions about how realistic it is and when the goals will be achieved.
A lot of people say, well, why should I get vaccinated? They go, there's not much COVID around in Australia. I've got more chance of, getting run over by a car than I have of catching COVID in this country. And to a sense, we're prisoners of our own success in this. If you get vaccinated, you get to change how we live as a country.
Good evening, thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. Make sure you do stay tuned to the very end of this bulletin for a pretty big announcement about 6 News. Investigative journalist Tom Ravlick will also be joining us live in a few minutes. But first tonight, a number of capital cities have come out of lockdown, but millions of Sydney-siders still have at least another week ahead of them. A number of venues remain of particular concern to health authorities, including the Life Cafe in Bondi, the Crossways Hotel in Strathfield, and the Joe Bailey Hairdresser in Double Bay. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian says she expects case numbers to continue to rise and that the effects of the state's lockdown will only begin to be seen in the next few days. Reporter Holly Shields begins our special coverage on the ground from the Sydney CBD.
Right now I'm in the heart of Sydney CBD, smack bang in the middle of our 2-week lockdown. While it may look fairly desolate at the moment, this is nothing compared to the ghost town it was earlier in the week. It looks like some Sydney-siders may not have gotten the memo and are ignoring the state authorities' orders and trying their luck at going somewhere they shouldn't. But suspicious movement aside, Sydney has reached a critical point in its emergency lockdown, as health authorities must now assess the effectiveness of the measure and determine whether or not further restrictions will be necessary. As of now, there have been 195 new cases in New South Wales within the last 2 weeks alone, following a limousine driver who tested positive to the virus after coming into contact with an international flight crew. While these members are comparatively steady, more concerning now than ever before is the presence of the Delta variant, a deadlier mutation of the coronavirus. Across the state, around 200 venues and 70 public transport routes have been flagged as potentially contaminated, with many unlucky visitors now in isolation. It goes without saying, we here in Sydney are hoping these 2 weeks will be the last of the lockdowns, and with the compliance of the public, health authorities will be able to keep transmissions to a minimum.
The lockdown for Perth and the Peel region ended early yesterday morning, but a number of restrictions still remain. Under the current measures, mask wearing will remain compulsory and businesses are subjected to the 4 square metre rule and a maximum of 20 patrons until at least midnight tomorrow. Residents in the previously lockdown areas are also barred from visiting recreation, hospitality or entertainment venues and public gatherings until Tuesday, when further restrictions are expected to be eased by Premier Martin Gowan. Health authorities have warned people that they can face fines of up to $50,000 if they blatantly breach rules such as mask wearing. There's fears from health authorities that mixed messaging from state and federal leaders about the AstraZeneca vaccine may lead to some avoiding the jab entirely. Queensland Chief Health Officer Dr. Jeanette Young's comment earlier this week, where she said that she does not want under 40s to get the AZ jab despite the incredibly rare risk of blood clots, has caused backlash, with some on social media now calling her and Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk anti-vaxxers. Doctors are reporting cancellations from people scheduled to get their second dose of the vaccine, but are still urging people to get it. Chief Reporter Conor Forker has the latest developments from Brisbane.
Leaders who have developed the anti-COVID vaccines.
Dame Sarah Gilbert, one of the scientists who developed the AstraZeneca vaccine, served a dose of gratitude at Wimbledon. But would they get the same rapturous reaction here in Australia? AstraZeneca once billed as the workhorse of Australia's vaccine rollout. Then it was restricted to over 50s, over 60s. Now it's open to all. Last week, the federal government gave GPs indemnity to administer the AstraZeneca vaccine to under 40s, sparking a war of words with some states.
There has been no national cabinet decision about providing AstraZeneca to the under 40s.
For context, AstraZeneca carries an extremely rare risk of blood clots, around 4 to 6 people in every million, with the risk factor decreasing with age. But it's a risk many aren't willing to bear, including Queensland's Chief Health Officer, Jeanette Young.
We've seen up to 49 deaths in the UK from that syndrome. I don't want an 18-year-old in Queensland dying from a clotting illness who, if they got COVID, probably wouldn't die.
6 News spoke to one 20-year-old who had her first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine 3 months ago, telling us she experienced a horrible fever that night, went so cold then so hot, had a headache and muscle aches, head felt like a bowling ball, and my body was just so sore. I know someone else who felt like that for 3 weeks. Vaccine side effects vary with age, sex and health. Recipients are reporting having these side effects more commonly in the first dose of AstraZeneca and the second dose of Pfizer. Experts say it's normal, a sign the vaccine is working. While it's warned the mixed messaging seen last week could also act as a deterrent, there's been an uptick in uptake of AstraZeneca from younger Australians. That's since Scott Morrison made it easier for under 40s to get the beleaguered jab. More than 6,000 under 40s received either the first or second dose of AstraZeneca on Tuesday and Wednesday, compared to less than 4,500 on the days in the previous week. So is there a verdict on which vaccine to get? The experts are divided.
Nat, first I want to say that nearly every medical leader, Omar Khorshid of the AMA, the president of the College of GPs, myself, distanced themselves from Dr Young's comments yesterday. She's unfortunately out on a very lonely limb there.
And we're being told to choose our own advice, pick which expert to listen to.
October. No, please, can I just stop all this? This is getting absolutely silly. So I've put my advice out there very, very clearly. Now, people need to work out where they want to get advice from. And this is my advice. People, of course, can go and get their own advice. They can get it from wherever they wish to get it. But my advice is very, very clear.
The AstraZeneca vaccine is set to be phased out by October. Conor Forker, 6 News.
The family at the centre of South Australia's latest COVID scare have said they are overwhelmed by support they've received from the public. Christian and Adam Ryan are the proud parents of 4 kids, but when one of Adam's colleagues at an NT mine tested positive, the entire family went into self-isolation as a precaution. Now, the whole family of 6 people, including their baby girl, have got the virus. Ms Ryan told Channel 9 that all the love has been such a major uplift for us, and added that self-isolation is something so many would have already done. Officials say their actions may have even saved the state from a larger outbreak and a lockdown. Just days after unveiling a 4-phase plan to get Australia back to normal, the PM is facing criticism. Questions about how realistic it is and when the goals will be achieved. The end goal is for hospitalisation and fatality rates from COVID to be treated similar to the flu, and people who are fully vaccinated will be able to enter Australia without quarantining. But as the AstraZeneca confusion continues, as Connor reported on earlier, it's feared that these goals may not be reached for a while. Political reporter Christian Penny has this special report.
With half the country in lockdown over the last week, Australians have been hoping and thinking about a day when life will return to pre-pandemic times. It's unlikely to be any time soon, though. Not until Australia's vaccination rates meet benchmark levels can the Prime Minister's plan start rolling on. Snap lockdowns, border bans, and no international travel for almost the last 18 months. Prime Minister Scott Morrison addressed Australians on Friday, laying out a plan to live with the virus and return to pre-pandemic normal.
We have affirmed today a plan that has 4 phases that will be finalised in coming weeks based on the expert medical evidence.
The plan looks a little like this. We're in phase 1 right now: vaccinate, prepare and pilot, where we continue to suppress the virus, make the vaccine available to anyone over 16, and reduce incoming passenger caps by 50% to reduce pressure on quarantine facilities. Phase 2, focus will shift from suppression to minimising serious illness. Restrictions on vaccinated residents will be lifted, such as lockdowns, and caps for unvaccinated travellers will be restored. Phase 3, the consolidation phase, is expected to see hospitalisation and fatality rates similar to or better than the flu. So no lockdowns, exempt vaccinated residents from all domestic restrictions, no restrictions on returning travellers, and lifting restrictions for outbound travel for vaccinated people. And Phase 4, the final phase, will see uncapped arrivals for unvaccinated travellers, and life would look much like it did pre-pandemic, though testing of inbound travellers would continue. And it's largely based on Singapore's plan to live with COVID-19. There, 36% of the population is vaccinated, and 57% have had at least one dose. They plan to shift the focus from daily reporting of active case numbers, letting people work, travel and shop without quarantine or lockdown, and to manage COVID-19 like the flu. Greater Sydney is due to leave lockdown next Saturday, the Premier saying if trends continue...
If we continue to see those trends, we have a greater chance, of course, of getting out of the lockdown in a timely way.
Queensland lifted lockdown orders yesterday and the Northern Territory ended their lockdown on Friday at 1 p.m. Before we can enjoy the benefits of later phases of the plan, there has to be a dramatic uptake in vaccinations. Currently, only 6% of the population is fully vaccinated. The Prime Minister is clear, though.
You get vaccinated and this all changes.
Christian Penny, 6 News.
Right, we always want to know what you're thinking, so please let us know your thoughts on the response across the country to this latest outbreak. You can join the conversation by using hashtag 6newsau in the comments below, and you can email your thoughts as well to contact@6newsau.com. For his take, though, let's bring in live investigative journalist Tom Ravlick. Tom, good to speak with you. What do you make of how social media has reacted to what's going on?
Look, it's to be expected. I mean, the outbreak has caused, as has the pandemic over the past 18 months, a lot of fuss online. I think you'll find that it tends to be split on political lines. Some people, are Labor-oriented. They'll support Labor premiers. Other people that are oriented towards the coalition and sort of more libertarian, they will sort of argue against anybody who's got a lockdown. So the social media reaction is what I would expect. It can be fairly colourful at times, and then certainly not really polite. I mean, there are people who are using language, Leo, that isn't really for polite company.
Just going back to what we reported on earlier, those comments from Queensland Chief Health Officer Dr. Jeanette Young about the AstraZeneca jab, Do you think her comments and the general confusion over the advice could be a win for anti-vaxxers, as some have said?
I don't believe it's a win for anybody, quite frankly. There are those who might anti-vaxxers or vaccination skeptics. But some people call themselves informed choice advocates. I don't think it matters. What it results in is people having some doubt in the merit of vaccinations as a way of sort of dealing with the pandemic issue. I don't think anybody wins out of that. What happens is there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of argument, and there's nothing that really resolves that. I think the only way people are able to deal with it, and we've seen some of this in some of the media commentary from particular politicians and some media commentators online and on Twitter, go and talk to your doctor. The doctor is the only person who knows what you are able to take and knows your medical history. Anybody else is generally irrelevant.
Just finally, a number of people have been pointing out that some of Sky News' biggest so-called After Dark presenters have been heavily criticising Gladys Berejiklian over this latest outbreak, including Alan Jones, Paul Murray and Sharri Markson. What do you reckon is behind this?
The most important thing to remember here is people are generally, particularly Sky, some of the commentators on Sky, generally less in favour of lockdown. They've advocated proportionate responses, which in their view doesn't involve lockdown if there's a small number of cases. So I don't think it matters whether it's a person from the coalition or a person from the Labor Party sitting in the position of Premier. What you're seeing is this is happening with the Premier Marshal in South Australia as well. Okay, what you're seeing is an argument against what some people perceive to be an unreasonable imposition on liberty if there's a small number of cases. So this is where the crunch comes. It doesn't matter what the political loyalties are. The argument that people will run is there's a small number of cases, lockdowns are a bit over the top. How in heaven's name do you justify lockdown when there's only a small number of people gathering or a small number of people with COVID in a particular state at a particular time?
Right, always great to get your perspective. Tom Ravlic, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Alright, to other news tonight, dozens of wildfires are right now burning in the Canadian province of British Columbia as residents recover from record-breaking heat. Just late last month, the tiny village of Lisson recorded 49.6 degree heat, crushing the previous record of 45 degrees all the way back almost 85 years ago in 1937. A number of people are reported dead, including 2 who were attempting to shelter in a hole in the ground. Hundreds of sea animals have washed up dead in Sri Lanka, reportedly linked to a cargo ship fire weeks prior. According to the BBC, the remains of 176 turtles, 20 dolphins and 4 whales have washed ashore since the Express Pearl sank in early June, which experts fear could create a major environmental hazard for decades because it was carrying tons of oil in its tanks. Officials believe the fire was caused by a nitric acid leak, which the crew may have been aware of since mid-May. A number of mainstream media outlets have been accused of ignoring a new development in the Julian Assange saga. A key witness has admitted that the main allegations he made against the WikiLeaks founder were lies done in exchange for US immunity. The revelations were made in an article by Stundin, an Icelandic bi-weekly newspaper, but days later outlets like CNN, the BBC and the ABC have been accused of not reporting on the story by some. For example, if you look up the phrase Assange witness admits lie on Google, you'll find the original report from Stundin, and then the biggest outlet after that is India's WION. If you add a mainstream news outlet to the end of that search, you'll only find articles from last year and even further back. It comes just days after 11 Australian federal MPs called on US President Joe Biden to drop the espionage charges against Assange. A Americans are right now waking up and getting ready to celebrate the 4th of July, which of course is today. But why do they celebrate? Well, it was on this day in 1776 that the Declaration of Independence was published. Last year's celebrations were heavily affected as the US dealt with COVID-19, but as millions get vaccinated, it's expected that the regular parties and fireworks watching will go ahead as normal. We'll have more coverage as the day unfolds. Back home, Sean Burgoyne has made history last night as the 5th ever AFL player to play 400 games. Burgoyne began at Port Melbourne in 2002 after being picked up in the draft a year prior, and last night played for Hawthorn against his original club. The game was supposed to be played interstate, but the latest national COVID outbreak meant all 18 teams, including the 2 South Australian teams, had to be moved to Victoria. He joins just 4 other players to make that milestone, those being North Melbourne's Brent Harvey at 432, Hawthorn's Michael Tuck at 426, Richmond's Kevin Bartlett at 403, and Essendon's Dustin Fletcher at exactly 400. Now to tomorrow's forecast right across the country. Brisbane partly cloudy, a top of 20, 16 in Sydney, 12 degrees in the nation's capital Canberra, 13 in Melbourne, starting the day at just 6 in Hobart, getting up to 9 later in the day. Still pretty nice not to have any rain down there. Heavy clouds and 13 in Adelaide, 17 in Alice Springs, also 17 in Perth, a chance of some light showers, and in Darwin a warm top of 31. And finally tonight, as we've been teasing all day and all night, we have an exciting announcement. We're proud to announce that from July 19th, 6 News will be launching the following 2 programs. Firstly, Press Gallery, hosted by our political reporter Christian Penny. You won't have to wait until Sunday morning for all the latest political news, because we'll get you up to speed during the week with the latest story out of Canberra. It's short, and it's not just an interview show for the politicians or people in the media. We'll instead be fact-checking a lot and bringing you stories that may have even been underreported. And as part of our expansion into podcasts, we'll also be launching Uncensored, long-form interviews with a key newsmaker about issues that matter to them and matter to you. No shouting, no edits, and no censorship. The way interviews should be. Now, if you have a guest you want interviewed, please email us and we will reach out to them. Our email is contact@6newsau.com. 6 News Now will also be expanded to bring you more updates during the week. You can listen to it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts right now. A new episode was just released a few hours ago because we're doing daily COVID updates. And our regular Sunday bulletin, which you're watching right now, will continue to bring you the latest headlines and breaking news every Sunday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, not a week in review. Now, if you're excited by these changes, there is one way you can really support us, apart from subscribing for free on YouTube and following our podcast. You can now donate just $4 a month on Patreon for a world of exclusive benefits. That includes finding out stories and things we're doing before everyone else. In fact, this announcement was on Patreon 3 days ago. If you'd like to know more, go to patreon.com/6newsau. Again, the changes come into effect starting July 19. We'll be releasing more details on exact time slots in the coming days and weeks, so stay tuned. And that is 6 News for this Sunday evening. You can start date with the latest headlines by heading to our website, 6newsau.com, and following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Lit. Just search 6 News AU to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.